set up this morning. Pray. We have a bunch of people sick, including the whole Rodriguez family and a lot of our worship team. So be praying for them this morning as they are recovering and feeling well. But we want to welcome you, whether you're here in our live studio audience here in the room or whether you're watching online, whether it's at home or somewhere else this morning. Today, we are going to get right into the Word, and then we're going to have a really good time of reflection and just kind of sitting with the Lord at the end of our gathering today. So I want to continue in the book of Job. Now, so far in the book of Job, we have had 37 chapters of why, right? 37 chapters of this man's life completely falling apart from the top to the bottom. Every single aspect of his life has fallen apart. And this is a man of God that we're told. And remember, we are learning this is a fictional story. Most likely, he did not exist. It might have been based off of an upstanding man that was known, but it became folklore, right? And this is a story that was told about someone losing everything so that we could learn about how we endure during suffering, how we walk through seasons of trial, and how God is present and what we do in those seasons of suffering. So we started with chapter 1, and then we've kind of gone through different sections. And today we are going to hear from God. Today we're going to hear from God. He responds to Job. Now, remember Job sitting with his 3 friends. Now, they have all different ideas about why bad things have been happening to Job. And we often have all kinds of questions about why do bad things happen to good people? Why do children suffer needlessly? Why is there still hunger and starvation in the world? Why is there still war going on? Why is there famine? Why are there all of these different difficult things? We know that sometimes when we suffer, it's because of the consequences of our own choices, right? Our own sin. Sometimes when we suffer, it's the consequences from somebody else's choices that unfortunately hurt us as well. And then we also know that God is sovereign over all, even though we live in a very fallen world. So sometimes there is just pain and suffering in this world. And we want to ask why. That is the very natural question. That is a normal question for us to ask. But it's also normal that we don't get an answer. It's also normal that we can cry out to that and we don't hear back on exactly why this happened. We try to give each other trite answers sometimes, like, oh, God's in control. He's got this. Oh, if the Lord means for it to happen, then no. We talked about God's sovereignty, even though we live in a fallen world, because his greatest good for us is our eternity, right? Not just our tomorrow, but every single tomorrow after that. So after all of these questions, after all of these ponderings, we've learned that God can handle us like shaking our fist. God can handle us yelling questions and hurling accusations at him. It's okay to go stand at the ocean or in your backyard or by your bedside and just get mad and ask God, what's going on? This doesn't feel fair. All of those things. Job did all of those things. And today we hear from God. The question is it the answers that Job is expecting? Is it the kind of answers we want when we're asking God, why is this stuff happening to me? Why is this stuff happening to people in the world? So today we're going to go to Job chapter 38. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. Who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorant words? Brace yourself like a man, because I have some questions for you, and you must answer them. Is that the start you expected? When we say that God finally shows up in this conversation for 37 chapters and thousands of words, they've been posturizing, and having hypothetical conversations about why all of this stuff has happened to Job. They want to know why, what's God going to do about it? And the first thing that Job hears is questions. I've got some questions for you. So get ready, dude, is what God is saying here. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you know so much. Who determined the dimensions and stretched out the surveying line that supports the foundations, and who laid its cornerstone as the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Who kept the sea inside of its boundaries as it burst forth from the womb? And as I clothed it with clouds and wrapped it in thick darkness, for I locked it behind barred gates, limiting its shores. I, the Lord, said, this far, no farther will you come. Here your proud waves must stop. Have you ever commanded the morning to appear? Caused the dawn to rise in the east? Have you made daylight spread to the ends of the earth, or bring an end to the night's wickedness? As the light approaches, the earth takes shape like clay pressed beneath a seal. It is robed in brilliant colors. The light disturbs the wicked and stops the arm that is raised in violence. Have you ever explored the springs from which the seas come? Have you explored their depths? Do you know where the gates of death are located? Have you seen the gates of utter gloom? Do you realize the extent of the earth? Tell me about it if you know. Where does light come from? Where does darkness go? Can you take each to its home? Do you know how to get there? But of course, you know all of this, for you were born before it was all created, and you are so very experienced. I love it when God gets a little sarcastic. Have you visited the storehouses of the snow or seen the storehouses of hail? I reserve them as weapons for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war. Where's the path to the source of light? Where is the home of the east wind? Who created a channel for the torrents of rain? Who laid out the path for the lightning? Who makes the rain fall on barren land in a desert where no one lives? Who sends rain to satisfy the parched ground and make the tender grass spring up? Does the rain have a father? Who gives birth to dew? Who's the mother of the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens? For the water turns to ice as hard as rock, and the surface of the water freezes. Can you direct the movement of the stars? Binding the cluster of the Pleiades or loosening the cords of Orion? Can you direct the sequence of the seasons or guide the bear with her cubs across the heavens? Do you know the laws of the universe? Can you use them to regulate the earth? Can you shout to the clouds and make it rain? Can you make lightning appear and cause it to strike as you direct? Who gives intuition to the heart and instinct to the mind? Who's wise enough to count all the clouds? Who can tilt the water jars of heaven when the parched ground is dry and the soil has hardened into clods? Can you stalk prey for a lioness? Satisfy the young lion's appetites as they lie in their dens or crouch in the thicket? Who provides food for the ravens? And when their young cry out to God and wander about in hunger? Question after question after question. I'm curious if it's as many accusations that Job and his friends kind of lob at God, if that's how many questions God returns with to Job. I haven't done the math on that quite yet. And so many times we just want answers, and then we think, yes, God shows up. I feel his presence. Now I'm going to get to know why. But he doesn't answer that. Verse 2, who are you? God asked Job, who are you? Verse 4, where were you? Where were you? When I started this whole creation thing, when the whole earth started spinning, Job, were you there? Verse 5, what do you know about this? You think you have all the answers, you and your friends, about what's been going on and why it's happened and why bad things happen to you. You think you have all of the answers. What do you actually know about how the world works, Job? Verse 34, can you do all of the things that I, God, can do? One of the things that struck me really early on in studying this particular chapter was that it said the Lord answered Job from a whirlwind. We were talking the last couple of weeks about how Job has been sitting basically at the campfire of the ashes of his whole life. Everything has been, gone scorched earth on him. Everything he's lost, all of his children are gone, all of his wealth, all of his standing in the world. His wife is saying, curse God and die. His friends are saying, this is your fault, you must have sinned. Other friends have other ideas. He feels like, okay, God, I know you're good, I know you're sovereign, but I can't find you. I don't know where you are, but if I could plead my case, I would be right. And God shows up and he's like, you have all of these great ideas about what's going on, but I actually have a couple of questions for you. Who are you? Where were you? What do you know? And then all of these different things come together in this chapter, and it just is question after question about what God is sovereign over in the whole world. And most of these questions, if you look at them closely, have nothing to do with Job. They have nothing to do with Job. All of Job's questions are about himself. God, where were you when my life was falling apart? God, what were you doing? God, who are you supposed to be to me right now? God, why is all of this happening? He has all of these questions about his own life. And when God starts to answer, God starts to ask him questions about everything else going on in the world. And he begins to take Job's perspective from the whirlwind, from all of the chaos, from all of the crazy going on around him. And he lifts his perspective from those ashes and he gets him to look around. Hey, look up at the stars in the sky. Do you know how to control those? Hey, look at the wind and how the seasons are changing. Are you making that happen? Look throughout all of history and all of time. Were you there? Do you know how all of this works? Job doesn't actually get answers from God. What he gets are questions from God. But most of the time when we want to know why, what we need to know is who. Who is sovereign? Who is there with us? Who is over all? Who is talking to us about this? At the beginning of the chapter, the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. Man, a bunch of us can identify with the idea of the whirlwind and God speaking out of the chaos and the crazy going on in our lives. But more fascinating than the concept of the whirlwind in that verse is who's the one talking? The Lord. The Lord answered. This is chapter 38. Again, remember the chapters and verses weren't originally there. But if you go back through the rest of this story, every single time they talk about God, like God will answer and God will vindicate me and all of these things. And maybe God is punishing you, Job, and all of these different things. Every single time they talk about God, the word in the Hebrew is El, E-L. You might have heard that as part of like El Shaddai or El Elyon, other names and descriptions of God's character. But this term El was not just used for the one true God. This was actually a term that all kinds of cultures in the ancient Near East would have used to reference their God. Whoever they were worshiping, whatever deity at the time that they thought was in control, the way that they would say that God, lowercase g, capital G, however they wanted to do it, would be the word El. So the entire time they're talking about what's going on in his life, he's talking about what's going on in his life. He's talking about who's going to vindicate him, all of these things. It is El. This is God, lowercase, generic. Yeah, well, God is going to do this. God is going to do this. But there's no actual personal relationship to that name because, like I said, it was the generic name for any deity, God that you may worship. And then you get to chapter 38, and it is not God, the generic, that answers and starts speaking to Job. It's the Lord. And in a lot of your Bibles, if you're using an English translation, a lot of times it'll be Lord and it'll be all capital letters. The reason that it's all capital letters is it signifies what the original language was, what was the word used for Lord there. And this is the first time in this story where the name of God, Yahweh, shows up. It's Yahweh who answered. If you've studied more in the Old Testament with us here at Sacred, we've talked about that name, and it's one that God disclosed himself and who he was, and he said, I am. I am that I am. In other words, I am the living, I am the true. I always have been, I always will be. I am the actual present God. See, a lot of times when we're dealing with stuff in our life, we spend 37 chapters of our life calling out or talking about a generic God. It's the in God we trust that's on the back of our money. That's El. That's El. It's the God that we don't really know, but people talk about, well, God's got it, you know. It's the trite answers. It's those, well, whoever's in control, that's the person in control. That, you know, big man upstairs. This kind of foreign concept, this kind of distance concept of who God is. And, you know, well, if we could find him, it would be different, but he's far off from us and he's very removed. He might have set the earth in motion, but then he just leaves it alone. That's El. That's that lowercase g God. And God shows up on the scene in Job's life in this moment after these 37 chapters of complaints and ideas about why he's doing what he's doing and what's going on in the world. And he introduces himself, and the story introduces himself as, no, this is who I really am. This isn't some generic God that shows up to give you a generic answer, Job. This is someone who's actually involved in the details of this world. And he shows himself involved in the details by the questions that he asked of Job. Were you there for the details? Because I was. Do you know where the gates of hell are? Because I do. You're not there. Right? Do you know where the waters come forth? Are you able to create a path for lightning? How about the rain for the fields? Do you provide for that, Job? Because I do. You've been talking about this generic God out there. You've been talking about this far off Lord, but let me introduce myself to you. Let me show you who I really am. And one of the biggest things we can learn is that he is nothing like Job. He's nothing like Job. God sets himself apart not in distance, but in authority. God sets himself apart not in love and at an arm's length, but in saying, here's our positions in this story. See, you thought we could have this case and I would listen to you and you would change my mind, but let me tell you, all that changes is under my approval. All that goes on is under my hand. I'm the one that's sovereign over every single bit of it. And here's the fascinating thing that happens when we, like Job, get these questions from God when what we wanted was answers. We look at something else. If all I'm doing is looking at my life, if all I'm doing is looking at what's gone wrong, and God says, do you know where the stars are? What do you most likely do? You look up. If all I'm doing is focusing on the negative, if all I can see is the pain that I've been enduring, and then God says, do you know where the rivers start? What do? You look over there. If God says, hey, I control where the waves stop and I give them their lines. Then we look at the tides and how they're controlled. When we get our perspective outside of our own little bubble and we begin to look at all of creation and all that God has created, we get to look at all that he is sovereign over and everything that he is dealing with. We get to see all of these things. We get to see the greatness of it. We recognize the smallness of us. Does it make our pain go away in the moment? No. But does it maybe put it in perspective? Does it maybe change our response of saying, why God, to who is this God that controls all of this? When for a second I can stop asking myself why and I can start saying, wow, who are you, Lord? That you're the one who set this earth in motion, that you're the one who knit me together in my mother's womb, that you're the one that has light that disturbs the wicked. You're the one that tells darkness when to end. You're the one who provides for the lion cubs. You're the one who provides for the ravens when they cry out. So clearly, you can handle me. Clearly, Yahweh, the God that says, I am present here. I am in your pain. I can bring peace. I can calm every storm because I control all the winds. The poet Mary Oliver said, wherever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. One of the very best things that God does for us is place us in creation. We are part of his creation. We are part of what God created. And so by putting us not off on our own, not making us make everything around us, he puts us among other things that he's created so that when we get a chance to change our perspective, to look up from our own lives, from our own pain and suffering, we can look around and see everything that God has created. Science proves what the Bible teaches us, that when we get out in nature, when we get out in God's creation, something happens in your brain, something happens in your body that is incredibly healing, that it's very restorative, not just to your body, but to your soul. And I truly think that that is because when God places us, his creation, among the rest of his creation, and we look around and we see it, something changes our perspective inside of, look at all of this. I am one part of this. But there is a God who is with me and is in control and is sovereign over all of this. And if I can't understand how all of the trees grow, if I can't understand how all of the winds work, if I can't understand how lightning and how darkness ends, if I can't understand the gates and the starts of every river, then it's okay that I also don't understand everything that happens to me. Because there's a lot in this world that we don't get. Now, we have brilliant scientists with amazing minds that God has given them, and they can understand so many things about tiny little details of this creation. But the smarter the scientists, the more likely they are to tell you about some other subject. I know nothing about that, right? They know what they know, and they also are very clear about what they don't know. And we want to say that we should have all of the details about all of our life. And God is saying, you don't have the details about a lot of life. There's a lot going on that you don't understand because it's for him to understand. It is for him to understand. There's a verse in the New Testament that talks about giving all of your requests to God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. The fact is, we don't even understand the peace that we can feel in the presence of God. We know that we can feel it. We know that there's a difference when we worship or when we're praying or when we're in the word or something breaks through in the teaching into our hearts and we recognize something. there's a peace there. We don't understand it. So it's also okay if we don't understand all the pain. It's okay if we don't understand all the pain. Because we don't even understand all the peace. At the beginning of Job, chapter 1, verse 21, the Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. We actually sing that in a song in church on a regular basis. He gives and takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He gives and takes away. And we don't always realize what we're singing. Because if we did, we might not sing it. Right? Because if you think about that, it's almost abrasive. He gave me everything that I have. He takes everything away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Right? It doesn't sound like something you're Ed with. Blessed be the Lord, right? He gives and he takes away. Blessed, and we want to sing that when he's giving us something, right? And what we want him to take away is what we don't want. Right? Lord, I want you to take away that toxic person. Lord, I want you to take away that coworker that is just driving me batty. Lord, I want you to take away that bill. Lord, I want you, yes, he gives it, he takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But if we're talking about things that he has given us, and every good and perfect gift is from above and from him, then that means sometimes things that we like and things that are good for us are also going to be taken out of our lives. And what do we say? Ouch. Blessed be the name of the Lord. 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 When I don't know what else to say, okay, blessed be the name of the Lord. When I don't have all the answers, blessed be the name of the Lord. When he's asking me rhetorical questions that I probably don't need to answer, blessed be the name of the Lord. If you keep reading in the book of Job, God keeps talking to him. And there's this conversation that happens. And it feels harsh. And like, at least I certainly feel like this sarcasm level coming through where he's like, really? Do you know that? Go ahead. Come on. Come on. Answer me, Job, if you really know all of these things. And we're going to finish up next week in this series in Job and this idea of who is God here in this story, in our lives and in our pain. But this is what just strikes me. God did show up in the conversation. This was not this one-way argument of Job just yelling at God and asking questions. Maybe Job didn't get the answers that he wanted, but he got what he needed, which was the presence of God and acknowledgement of who God is in his life and who he is in the world. That yes, he's part of this creation that is a broken world. God talks about all these different aspects of creation, but he talks to Job. He talks to Job. He's talking about the ravens, but he's not talking to the birds. He's talking about the lions, but he's not talking to the lions. He talks about the lightning and he talks about the rain, but he's not talking to the rain. He doesn't hold conversations with the rest of creation. He holds conversations with Job. He's willing to hold a conversation with somebody who has just yelled at him and declared things unfair. He's willing to ask hard questions that might feel like they would initially push Job away, like, hey, don't talk to me like that. I've just lost everything, right? God is willing to lean into the pain that Job is feeling and say, all right, so you really want to talk? Let's really talk about how this world works. Let's talk about how all of it is put into motion. Do you know how to have that conversation? He's willing to get down into the nitty and gritty, not just of Job's life, but of all of life, and have a conversation with humanity, with us. Isn't it beautiful to know that you can yell at God, you can rail at God, you can ask him why for 37 chapters, you can have your friends be telling you all kinds of false narratives about why it's happening in your life and why things have gone wrong, and you can cry out and you can shake your fist and you can have all of these worries and concerns and your own opinions about it, and God is willing to step in and say, do you know who I really am? I'll talk to you about it. I'll talk to you about who I really am. The most powerful, the real, one true God who did set it all into motion, who did make the stars to move, who did all of these things, is willing to get down and dirty in the ashes of your life and have a conversation with you about it. And that is comforting. That is powerful. That is incredible. And it doesn't always answer why. If I told you that we always got a why answer, I'd be lying. But I can always tell you who answers. I can always tell you who. Here's how we're going to close today. There's a song that we're going to listen to, the second one, Ben, by the Man in Black, Johnny Cash. Now, it's not a Johnny Cash original, okay? It's not one of his songs, but it's a hymn that he recorded, and I mean, his voice is just iconic and raw, and if you were Job sitting there and scraping boils, I think you might sound like Johnny Cash. You know, like I think that that's where your voice might be. And the song is called In the Garden. It's a very old hymn. He describes it, it's an album from, like, I think it's called like My Mother's Hymn Book or something. It's a hymn that I definitely grew up hearing, that my parents grew up singing in church. So if you grew up in a church tradition, you might have sung this long ago. But the idea for this song today, for our time of reflection before I close in prayer, is the line, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own. He walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own. So this morning, as we come and we all sit and we have all of these things that are going on in our lives or in our family or in our friends' lives, that there's a lot of why questions. I just want us to feel the Yahweh God's presence. I am here. Recognizing that he is willing to always step into that and have a conversation with us, to talk with us about everything in this world. Ben, will you play that song?